The night Gotham fell, Bruce Wayne was already dying, not from any single wound, though he had plenty. 3 cracked ribs from the Joker's crowbar, a concussion from Bane's fists, burns across his back from Firefly's incendiaries. His left knee was barely functional, held together by braces and sheer stubbornness. He was 52 years old, and his body had been breaking down for the last decade. But he kept fighting because that's what he did. That's what he'd always done. He stood in Crime Alley, the place where it had all begun, where his parents had died 37 years ago, and watched Gotham burn. The Joker's latest toxin had turned half the city into mindless killers. Not zombies. Not quite. They were still human. Still screaming. But they'd lost everything that made them people. They killed because the toxin rewired their brains to crave violence the way an addict craved their next fix. Batman had tried everything. The antidote he'd synthesized had only worked on early-stage infections. The GCPD was overwhelmed. The National Guard had been called in but was retreating, establishing quarantine lines that meant condemning everyone still inside to death. Alfred was dead. Heart attack, 3 days ago, while trying to evacuate civilians from the Narrows. Dick was missing, last seen fighting in the Bowery. Tim was in critical condition at Leslie Thompkins' underground clinic. Barbara was still operational, but Oracle could only do so much when the entire city's infrastructure was collapsing. And Bruce Wayne, the Batman, was out of options. He limped through the alley, his cape torn, his cowl cracked, blood seeping through the advanced armor that had cost millions to develop and repair. Around him, the infected prowled, their eyes wild with chemically induced madness. He'd put down 16 of them in the last hour, 16 people he'd failed to save. The infected were closing in now. Too many of them. His utility belt was empty, no more batarangs, no more smoke pellets, no more miracles. He had his fists, and what was left of his will. "Come on then," he growled, his voice raw from shouting orders that no one had followed, warnings that no one had heeded. They rushed him as a pack. Batman met them with everything he had left. He broke noses, shattered jaws, used pressure points and nerve strikes that should have dropped them instantly. But the toxin made them feel no pain, and there were always more. One of them got through his guard, tackled him to the ground. Batman's head cracked against the pavement, the same spot where his mother's pearls had scattered so many years ago. He could see them in his mind's eye as his vision blurred, white pearls rolling across crimson blood. This was it. This was how the Batman died, torn apart in the same alley where he'd been born. Then the light came. It was golden, impossibly bright, cutting through the smoke and darkness like the wrath of an angry god. The infected screamed and scattered, their damaged minds unable to process the radiance. Batman tried to rise, failed, managed to get to his knees. Through the light walked a figure. It was enormous, 8 feet tall at minimum, clad in armor of burnished gold that seemed to generate its own illumination. The armor was ornate beyond anything Batman had ever seen, covered in eagles and lightning bolts and script in languages he didn't recognize. In one hand, the figure carried a spear that crackled with energy. Its face was hidden behind a helmet shaped like a snarling eagle. The figure stopped 3 feet from Batman and looked down at him. When it spoke, its voice was deep, resonant, utterly inhuman. "Bruce Wayne, the God Emperor of mankind has need of you." Batman's tactical mind tried to process this new variable. Armor that advanced didn't exist. The energy readings from that spear would require a power source that physics said was impossible. And that voice synthesized? Or something else? "Who?" Batman coughed, tasted blood. "What are you?" "I am Valdor, Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. I serve the Master of Mankind. And you, Bruce Wayne, have been chosen." "Chosen for what?" The Golden Warrior Valdor looked around at the burning city, at the infected prowling the shadows, at the smoke rising into a dark sky. "Your world is dying. Your methods have failed. You have fought evil with the tools of a mortal man, and evil has proven stronger. The Emperor offers you another way." Batman tried to stand, made it halfway before his knee gave out. Valdor caught him with one massive hand, held him upright as easily as if Batman weighed nothing. "I don't believe in gods," Batman managed. "The Emperor is not a god. He is mankind's greatest protector, its most devoted servant, as you have tried to be, for your city. But where you have failed through limitation of flesh, the Emperor can grant you transcendence. Behind Valdor, reality was tearing. The golden light was coming from a rift, a wound in the fabric of space that showed impossible vistas beyond Gothic spires reaching toward alien stars. Vast ships in orbits around fortress worlds. Armies of warriors in armor similar to Valdor's but less ornate. What's happening? Batman's detective instincts were screaming alerts even as his body failed him. What is that? A doorway. Between your reality and ours. The Emperor foresaw your need. He has seen what you could become, what you must become, if humanity is to survive the darkness that approaches. I can't leave Gotham. My city, your city is lost. Look at it. Batman looked. In his heart, he'd known it for hours now. Maybe days. Gotham was too far gone. The infection had spread too far, too fast. Even if they found a cure now, even if they could distribute it, the death toll would be in the hundreds of thousands. The city would never recover. He'd failed. The Emperor offers you a choice, Valdor said quietly, something almost like compassion in that inhuman voice. Return to your city and die in its ashes. Or come with me, transcend your human limitations, and fight evil on a scale you cannot yet imagine. Fight to ensure what happened here never happens to another world. Batman looked at the rift, at the impossible reality beyond. Every instinct told him this was wrong, that he should stay, that Gotham needed him. But Gotham was dying. And he'd learned, over 30 years of war in the shadows, that sometimes the only way to save people was to make the hard choice. If I go with you, what happens to me? You will be remade, transformed, enhanced beyond human capability. You will become one of the Adeptus Astartes, a space marine, the Emperor's finest warriors, his angels of death. Angels of death. Batman had been called that before, whispered in fear by the criminals of Gotham, but this was something else. This was literal. An explosion rocked the alley. Somewhere close, a building was collapsing. Batman could hear screaming, real screaming, not the mindless howling of the infected. People still alive, still trapped, still dying. He couldn't save them. That was the truth that broke him. He dedicated his entire life to saving people, and in the end, he couldn't save anyone. Make me one of them, Batman said. Make me strong enough to matter. Valdor nodded once. The Emperor will be pleased. Come. The Golden Warrior lifted Batman carefully, surprisingly gentle, and carried him toward the rift. Batman looked back once at Gotham, at the city that had defined his entire existence. Flames reflected in the windows of Wayne Tower. The bat signal was dark, its light extinguished. I'm sorry, he whispered to the ghosts of his parents, to Alfred, to everyone he'd failed. Then Valdor stepped through the rift, and Gotham disappeared. Batman woke to pain, not the familiar pain of broken bones or torn muscles he'd learned to live with that decades ago. This was different. This was deep, cellular, like every atom of his body was being torn apart and restructured. He tried to move, couldn't. His limbs were restrained, held fast by metal clamps. He forced his eyes open, bright lights overhead, clinical white, medical equipment surrounding him, but nothing he recognized. The machines beeped and hummed with unfamiliar rhythms. And standing over him, looking down with an expression of cold professional assessment, was a figure in white robes marked with a red cross and a skull. Subject is conscious, the figure said in Gothic, a language Batman didn't know but somehow understood, the words translating themselves in his mind. Remarkable. The sedation should have kept him under for another 6 hours. Let me go. Batman's voice was hoarse, damaged. Where am I? What have you done to me? The robed figure, a man, Batman thought, though his face was hidden behind a rebreather, adjusted something on one of the machines. You are in the Apothecarian of the Imperial Palace, on Holy Terra. I am Chief Apothecary Hadriel. And as to what we've done to you, we have begun the process of saving your life and remaking you into something greater. Terra. The word carried weight, history, significance, Earth. but not his Earth. This was the Earth of another universe, another timeline. The Rift. Valdor. It was real. The transformation process, Hadriel continued, moving around the medical bed to check other instruments, is normally begun on pre-adolescent subjects. Their bodies are still developing, still malleable enough to accept the gene seed implants. You, Bruce Wayne, are over 50 years old. Your body is damaged, scarred, worn by decades of trauma. By all rights, you should die within the first hour of the process. Then why do it? Because the God Emperor of mankind has decreed it. His will is absolute. If he believes you can survive, then you will survive. Or you will die in the attempt, and your failure will be recorded as his will as well. Batman tested his restraints again. They didn't budge. Whatever alloy they were made of, it was far beyond anything he'd encountered on his Earth. I didn't agree to this. You agreed when you asked to be made strong enough to matter. Hadriel loomed over him, and Batman saw the apothecary's eyes for the first time cold, calculating without empathy. You will be remade into an Adeptus Astartes, a space marine. The process requires 19 organ implants, extensive genetic modification, hypnotic indoctrination, and psychological conditioning. It will take months. It will be agonizing. Many aspirants die, but if you survive, you will be transformed into the ultimate warrior faster, stronger, more resilient than any baseline human can imagine. And if I refuse, then you will be returned to your dying world, where you will perish in the ashes of your failure. The Emperor offers this gift once. There is no negotiation. Batman lay still, processing. Everything Hadriel said aligned with what Valdor had told him. This was the choice he'd made. In Crime Alley, with Gotham burning around him, he'd chosen to leave everything behind for the chance to become something more. No, not something more. Something that could actually protect people on the scale they needed protection. Do it, Batman said. Hadriel nodded. The first implant is the secondary heart. It will allow your body to survive the trauma of the subsequent procedures. This will hurt, Bruce Wayne. More than anything you have experienced. I suggest you pray to the Emperor for strength. I don't pray. You will. The apothecary pressed something on his control panel. Batman felt a sharp pain in his chest, the medical machinery extending surgical instruments directly into his body cavity. The pain built, crescendoed, became a white-hot agony that consumed his entire world. He didn't scream. He'd learned decades ago that screaming accomplished nothing, but he wanted to. Time became meaningless. Batman drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of pain and the occasional voices of the apothecaries discussing his progress in clinical terms. He felt his body changing, reshaping itself at the cellular level. His bones thickened, fused with ceramite compounds that made them unbreakable. His muscles tore and regrew, fiber by fiber, becoming denser, more efficient. New organs took root in his body: a third lung, a multi-stomach that could digest nearly anything, glands that produced acids and poisons. During the lucid moments, he thought about Gotham, about the people he'd left behind, about whether this was strength or cowardice to abandon his city rather than die with it. But he also thought about the visions he'd seen in the Rift, the glimpses of this universe, the Imperium of Man. A galaxy-spanning civilization locked in eternal war against horrors that made the Joker look like a petty thief. Literal demons. Alien monsters that devoured entire planets. Machines that wanted to convert all organic life into themselves. This universe needed warriors who could fight on that scale, and Batman had always been about fighting at the level the enemy required. If he survived this, he would be such a warrior. He flatlined during the implantation of the Biscopia, the organ that would grant him superhuman muscle growth. His primary heart stopped. The apothecaries worked frantically to revive him, but his body wasn't responding. In the darkness, Batman felt himself slipping away. He saw his parents, saw Alfred, saw all the people he'd loved and failed to save. They were waiting for him. But he also saw the people who still needed saving, not just in Gotham that was lost, but in this universe, across 1 million worlds, billions of humans living under constant threat of extinction. His secondary heart, the implanted organ, kicked in. The muscle contracted, pumped, forced blood through his system. Batman gasped, his eyes snapping open. The apothecary stepped back in surprise. Impossible, Hadriel breathed. His will alone restarted his secondary heart. I've never seen. Continue the procedure, Batman rasped. Don't stop. I can take it. And he did, week after week, month after month. Each new implant brought fresh agony. The osmodula reshaped his skeleton. The neuroglottis allowed him to taste toxins and identify them. The preumnor let him consume and digest substances that would kill a normal human. The omophagia, this one, disturbed him, let him gain memories by eating the brain tissue of the dead. The process was transforming him into something barely human, but Batman had been willing to sacrifice his humanity for Gotham long before he'd come to this universe. At least now, that sacrifice might actually matter. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Hadriel stood before him one last time. The implantation process is complete. Your body has accepted all 19 gene seed organs. This is unprecedented for someone your age. The Emperor's will is indeed absolute. Batman sat up slowly. The restraints had been removed. He felt different, not just stronger, but fundamentally altered. His senses were sharper, his thoughts clearer. When he flexed his hand, the muscles moved with machine-like precision. He looked down at his body and barely recognized it. He was massive now, easily 8 feet tall, his frame packed with muscle that made his previous physique look skeletal by comparison. His hands could crush steel. His bones could withstand impacts that would pulverize normal humans. How do you feel? Hadriel asked. Batman considered the question. How did he feel? Powerful. Capable. Like he'd been living his entire life with weights strapped to his limbs, and someone had finally cut them loose. Ready, he said. Good. Because your training begins now. You may have the body of an Adeptus Astartes, but you must learn to use it. You must learn our ways, our tactics, our purpose. And most importantly, Hadriel leaned closer. You must learn what it truly means to serve the Emperor of mankind. The training was brutal. Batman was assigned to a facility on Luna Earth's moon, where aspirants learned to become full space marines. Most of the trainees were children, adolescents who'd been recruited from worlds across the Imperium. They looked at Batman decades older, transformed at an age when most humans would be planning retirement with a mixture of awe and suspicion. The instructors were veteran space marines, hardened by centuries of warfare. They put Batman through exercises designed to break lesser beings. Hand-to-hand combat against servitors, cyborg slaves programmed to kill. Live-fire drills in vacuum, teaching him to fight in the cold void of space. Hypnotic indoctrination that filled his mind with tactical data, weapon specifications, enemy profiles. Batman absorbed it all, with the same obsessive focus he'd brought to his war on crime. He learned to fire a bolter, a massive gun that fired explosive rounds the size of his fist. He learned to wield a chainsword, a blade with motorized teeth that could tear through armor. He learned to move in power armor mechanized suits that enhanced his already superhuman strength. But he also brought something the instructors didn't expect: his own expertise. During a tactical exercise, Batman's unit was tasked with assaulting a fortified position. The other trainees planned a frontal assault, direct, brutal, effective. Batman suggested a different approach. Study the enemy's patrol patterns. Find the weak point in their defenses. Strike from an unexpected angle. The instructor, a grizzled space marine named Sergeant Macris, listened to Batman's proposal with growing interest. You think like a scout, not a shock trooper, Macris said. Space Marines are meant to be the Emperor's hammer, not his scalpel. A hammer is useless if you strike the wrong target, Batman replied. And a scalpel can kill just as effectively as a hammer if you know where to cut. They tried it Batman's way. The assault succeeded with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency. Word spread. The trainee who fought like no Space Marine they'd ever seen, who used tactics and strategy as weapons, not just brute force, who could infiltrate a position as easily as assault it. After 6 months of training, Batman was summoned to meet his new commander. The woman who greeted him wore the black armor of the Death Watch, an elite chapter that drew its members from all Space Marine chapters to fight alien threats. She was tall, even by Space Marine standards, her face marked with scars and augmetics. "I am Watch Captain Artemisia," she said. "I've reviewed your training records. You're unorthodox, undisciplined, and you question orders far more than any Space Marine should. Under normal circumstances, I would reject you from the Death Watch immediately." Batman stood at attention, his new armor midnight black, bearing a bat symbol on the chest plate that he'd insisted on gleaming in the cold light. But the Death Watch needs warriors who can think as well as fight. We face Xenos threats that are cunning, adaptable, and deadly. Sometimes, orthodoxy gets you killed. I'm willing to see if your methods work in the field. She moved closer. "You'll deploy with Kill Team Obsidian. Your first mission is on Armageddon Hive. An orc Wog is overrunning the planet. Your team's objective is to assassinate the war boss leading the invasion." "Understood. One more thing." Artemisia fixed him with a hard stare. "I know your history. I know you come from another reality, that the Emperor himself brought you here. That makes you unique. But it doesn't make you special. In the field, you're just another battle brother. You follow orders, you protect your squad, and you complete the mission. Clear? Crystal, good. Your transport leaves in 6 hours. The Emperor protects, battle brother." "The Emperor protects," Batman repeated, the words still foreign on his tongue. He didn't believe in the Emperor as a god, but he believed in the mission. And if serving this Emperor meant protecting humanity across 1,000,000 worlds, then he would serve, just as he'd served Gotham for all those years. Only now, he had the power to actually make a difference. The Thunderhawk gunship descended through Armageddon's polluted atmosphere like a bird of prey. Batman stood in the troop bay with his new squad, Kill Team Obsidian. 5 Space Marines, each from a different chapter, each bringing their own expertise. There was Brother Fenris, a space wolf, wild, aggressive, more beast than man. Brother Titus, an ultramarine by the book, tactical, obsessed with the Codex Astartes that defined proper Space Marine doctrine. Brother Vulcan, a salamander surprisingly compassionate for a killing machine, insistent that they protect civilians when possible. And Brother Dante, a blood angel, noble, artistic, but with something dark lurking beneath his surface. They'd been briefing Batman on orcs during the descent, green-skinned aliens that reproduced through spores, that grew larger and stronger through violence, that believed their weapons worked simply because they thought they should. They were savage, brutal, and utterly without fear. "The key is overwhelming firepower," Titus was explaining, his voice filtered through his helmet's vox. "Orcs respect strength above all else. Show weakness, and they'll tear you apart." "What about tactics?" Batman asked. Fenris laughed, a harsh bark. "Orcs don't do tactics, whelp. They charge, they fight, they die. Simple. Nothing is simple in war. You'll learn." The Thunderhawk shuddered as it took ground fire. The pilot's voice crackled over the vox. "Deploying in 30 seconds. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects." The squad responded in unison. Batman checked his bolter one final time. The weapon felt natural in his hands now, like an extension of his body. His armor's systems fed him tactical data, enemy positions, friendly forces, terrain analysis. His enhanced senses could detect the acrid smell of orc industry even through the Thunderhawk's sealed hull. The ramp dropped. Armageddon Hive and Furnace stretched before them, a vertical city of metal and smoke, its lower levels infested with orcs. Gunfire echoed across the landscape. Explosions painted the sky orange. This was war on a scale Batman had never experienced. "For the Emperor!" Titus roared, and leaped from the Thunderhawk. The rest of the squad followed. Batman jumped last, his armor's servos absorbing the impact as he hit the ground. They'd landed in a plaza that had once been a marketplace. Now it was a killing ground. Bodies, human and orc, littered the Ferrocrete. Buildings burned around them, and charging toward them was a mob of orcs. They were massive, 7-8 feet tall, with green skin and tusked faces. They wore scrap armor and carried crude weapons that looked like they'd been assembled from junk. But Batman's tactical assessment warned him not to underestimate them. They moved with surprising speed and coordination. "Contact," Dante called out. "For Sanguinius!" The Blood Angel opened fire with his bolter, the explosive rounds tearing through orc flesh. Fenris howled and charged, his chainsword screaming. Titus moved with mechanical precision, each shot a kill. Batman hung back for a moment, analyzing. The orcs were attacking in waves, but there was a pattern. The larger ones, the leaders, were directing the smaller ones. Take out the leaders, and the mob would lose cohesion. He aimed carefully, tracked the largest orc, and fired. 3 rounds, tight grouping. The orc's head exploded, and immediately the orcs around it began fighting amongst themselves for dominance. "Nice shot," Vulcan said over the Vox. He was using his flamer to create a wall of fire that funneled the orcs into a kill zone. "You think like a hunter, not a warrior. I think like someone who wants to win efficiently." The battle raged for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of non-stop violence, of bolter rounds and chain swords and orc choppas. Batman moved through the chaos with precision, each shot deliberate, each movement calculated. He wasn't as strong as Fenris, wasn't as fast as Dante, but he was smarter. He used the terrain, used the orcs' own aggression against them. When the last orc fell, Batman's armor was splattered with Xenos blood, but he was uninjured. "Not bad for your first engagement," Titus said, reloading his bolter. "You fight with unusual restraint. I fight to win. Winning requires more than caution. Sometimes it requires sacrifice." Before Batman could respond, the ground shook. From the rubble of a collapsed building, something emerged. It was an orc, but massive, 12 feet tall, packed with muscle, wearing armor made from looted Imperial equipment. It carried a power claw that crackled with energy and a massive gun that looked like it had been made from a tank barrel. "Nob," Fenris growled. "Big one. This will be fun." The orc Nob roared a challenge that echoed across the plaza, its yellow eyes fixed on the Space Marines, and it charged. "Spread out," Titus ordered. "Concentrate fire." They opened up with everything they had. Bolter rounds hammered the Nob, but its armor turned most of them aside. It kept coming, each footstep shaking the ground. Batman analyzed the situation in microseconds. Standard tactics weren't working. The Nob was too well armored, too tough. They needed a different approach. He activated his jump pack, a jetpack built into his armor's backplate. Rockets ignited, launching him into the air. The Nob tracked him, raised its gun to fire. But Batman wasn't attacking the Nob. He landed on the intact building behind the orc, planted his last melta charge on a structural support, and jumped again as the charge detonated. The building collapsed, tons of ferrocrete and metal crashing down on the Nob. The orc disappeared under the rubble. For a moment, there was silence. Then the rubble exploded outward. The Nob emerged, wounded and enraged, but still very much alive. It roared again, focused on Batman with pure hatred. But it was wounded now, slowed, and Batman had given his squad the opening they needed. Vulcan moved in with his Thunderhammer, a power weapon the size of a small car. He swung it with both hands, and the impact caught the Nob in the chest. Bone cracked. The orc staggered. Dante followed up with his power sword, the blade carving through the weakened armor. Fenris drove his chainsword into the orc's throat. The Nob crashed to the ground, finally dead. "Clever," Titus said, approaching Batman. "You use the terrain as a weapon, not standard doctrine, but effective. Standard doctrine would have gotten some of us killed. Perhaps." The Ultramarine paused. "You think differently than we do. Fight differently. Where did you learn these tactics?" Batman looked out over the ruined Hive City, thinking about Gotham, about the years spent fighting in shadows against enemies who outnumbered and outgunned him, in a place where brute force wasn't enough, where I had to be smarter than my enemies, or die. "Then that place taught you well. Come, we have a war boss to kill." They moved deeper into Armageddon Hive over the next 3 days. The orcs had turned the lower levels into a nightmare of scrap fortresses and slave pens. Batman saw horrors that reminded him of the worst things Gotham had produced: human prisoners being worked to death, civilians caught in crossfire, entire hab blocks converted into charnel houses. But he also saw something he'd never seen in Gotham: a unified response. The Imperial Guard was here, billions of soldiers fighting and dying to hold the line. Space Marine chapters from across the Imperium had deployed reinforcements. Titans walking war machines the size of skyscrapers stalked through the ruins, their weapons capable of leveling entire districts. This was war on a galactic scale. And Batman was just one warrior among billions. It was humbling, but it was also inspiring. Because for all the horrors, for all the death and destruction, humanity was fighting back. They weren't just victims waiting for salvation. They were soldiers, every one of them, holding the line against the darkness. Kill Team Obsidian's mission took them to the heart of the Orc territory, a massive fortress built from the wreckage of an Imperial factory. Intelligence suggested the war boss was inside, directing the Wa from his throne of scrap and skulls. "We go in loud," Fenris said as they approached. "Kick the door, kill everything green, victory." Or, Batman suggested, "We infiltrate. Find the war boss's location. Strike before he knows we're there." "Orcs don't fear stealth," Titus said. "They'll see it as weakness. The war boss won't see anything if he's dead before he knows we're coming." Vulcan considered this. The Codex Astartes supports both approaches, but Brother Batman's suggestion minimizes civilian casualties. There are human prisoners in that fortress. A direct assault would kill them. That tipped the balance. They went with Batman's plan. The infiltration took 6 hours. Batman led the way, using his detective's instincts to find weak points in the Orc defenses. They moved through ventilation shafts, through forgotten maintenance tunnels, through spaces too small for normal humans but manageable for Space Marines who could move with surprising grace. They encountered Orc patrols 3 times. Each time, Batman eliminated them with silent efficiency, a blade through the throat. A snapped neck, kills that left no alarm raised. "You move like a ghost," Dante whispered over the Vox. "How did you learn to kill so quietly?" "Practice," Batman replied. "A lot of practice." They found the war boss in a throne room made from crushed Imperial vehicles. The Orc was massive, easily 15 feet tall, wearing armor painted in garish colors. Around him were his Nob's elite bodyguards and dozens of smaller Orcs. But Batman noticed something else. In the shadows behind the throne stood a figure in robes, humanoid but wrong. Its skin was too pale. Its eyes glowed with unnatural light, and when it moved, reality seemed to bend around it. "That's not an Orc," Batman said quietly. "No," Titus confirmed, his voice grim. "That's a sorcerer. A psyker corrupted by chaos. This isn't just an Orc invasion. Someone is backing them. Does that change the mission? It makes it more complicated. Chaos sorcerers are extremely dangerous. We'll need to." Batman was already moving. He'd analyzed the room, identified the angles, calculated the odds. The sorcerer was the real threat. The war boss was just muscle. He activated his jump pack, launched himself across the throne room in a blur of midnight black armor. His bolt pistol barked twice, both shots aimed at the sorcerer. The sorcerer raised a hand, and Batman's rounds froze in midair, held by some invisible force. The thing smiled, revealing too many teeth. "Astartes," it hissed in a voice that came from everywhere at once. "So predictable. So..." Batman crashed into it before it could finish the sentence. His gauntleted fist smashed into the sorcerer's face, breaking bones, shattering teeth. They tumbled together, grappling, and Batman could feel wrongness radiating from the creature, reality itself recoiling from its presence. Behind him, he heard his squad engage the Orcs. Bolter fire filled the throne room. Fenris howled his battle cry. The war boss roared orders. But Batman's focus was on the sorcerer. It was trying to cast. He could feel energy gathering, reality warping. If it completed whatever spell it was preparing, the entire team would be in danger. Batman's training kicked in. He'd been taught about chaos, about the warp, about psychers and the supernatural. The Imperium's doctrine was clear. Faith in the Emperor was a shield against the warp. Batman didn't have faith in the Emperor, but he had faith in something else. In the fundamental resilience of human will. in the idea that reality was stronger than delusion, that reason could overcome madness. He focused on that faith, used it as armor. The sorcerer's power washed over him and dissipated, not because of divine protection, but because Batman refused to believe it was real. The sorcerer's eyes widened in shock. How? How are you resisting? Because I've seen worse than you, Batman growled. He drew his combat knife, a power blade that could cut through nearly anything, and drove it into the sorcerer's chest. And I've killed worse than you too, the sorcerer screamed, the sound echoing across dimensions. Then it dissolved into ash and ichor, its corporeal form unable to maintain cohesion without its will to bind it. Batman stood, turned to help his squad. But they'd already handled the orcs. The war boss lay dead, Dante's power sword embedded in its skull. The knobs were scattered corpses. The lesser orcs had fled. The sorcerer? Titus asked. Dead. How did you resist its psychic attacks? You're not a psyker yourself. Batman considered the question. I've spent my life fighting enemies who tried to use fear and madness as weapons. This was just a more literal version of that. Vulcan placed a heavy hand on Batman's shoulder. You saved us all, brother. That sorcerer would have killed us if you hadn't acted. We're a team. That's what teams do. They stood in the throne room, surrounded by Xenos corpses, victorious. Batman felt something he hadn't felt in years, not satisfaction exactly, but a sense that he'd done something meaningful. He'd protected his squad, completed the mission, saved lives. Maybe this was what he'd been missing in Gotham. Not just the power to fight, but brothers to fight alongside. A war he could actually win. Extract is inbound, Titus announced. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects, the squad responded. Batman joined the chorus. Maybe he was starting to believe it. They returned to their battle barge, a massive warship in orbit, to find they'd been summoned. Not by Watch Captain Artemisia, but by someone more important, an Inquisitor. Batman had been briefed on the Inquisition during his training. They were the Imperium's secret police, investigators, and executioners all in one. They had authority second only to the Emperor himself, and they used that authority to hunt heretics, mutants, and Xenos infiltrators. The Inquisitor who greeted them in the battle barge's strategium was a woman named Covenant. She was younger than Batman expected, probably in her 30s, but her eyes were ancient, haunted by things she'd seen and done. She wore black armor under red robes, and a rosette marked with the symbol of the Inquisition hung around her neck. Kill Team Obsidian, she said without preamble. Your performance on Armageddon was exemplary. Particularly you, Brother Batman. Batman stood at attention. I did my duty, Inquisitor. You did more than that. You identified a chaos infiltration that our intelligence had missed. You eliminated a sorcerer that would have spread corruption across 3 sectors. And you did it using unorthodox methods that saved Imperial lives. She moved closer. That interests me. How so? Because the Inquisition needs warriors who can think as well as fight, who can investigate as well as kill. I've reviewed your history, the training records, the psychological profiles, the reports from your instructors. You're not like other Space Marines. You question orders. You prioritize civilian welfare over tactical objectives. Some would call that weakness. And you? I call it useful. Covenant pulled up a holo display showing a hive city towering spires, billions of inhabitants, industrial sectors stretching for miles. This is Hive Varkus, on the world of Tertius Prime. 3 months ago, citizens started disappearing. At first, we thought it was standard underhive violence. Then the disappearances spread to the middle levels, then the upper spires. Now, over 10,000 people have vanished without a trace. Batman studied the display, his detective's instincts already analyzing patterns. Slave trade? Initially, we thought so. But there's more. Strange symbols appearing in the lower hives. Mutations reported among the population. And strangest of all, witnesses claim to have seen aliens in the Undercity. Not orcs or Eldar, but something else. Something that moves in the shadows. Genestealers, Batman said. Covenant raised an eyebrow. You know of them? I've read the intelligence briefs. Alien infiltrators, part of the Tyranid species. They plant genetic infections in humans, creating hybrid offspring that can pass for human. Over generations, they build a cult that worships the alien hive mind. When enough of them gather, they summon a Tyranid hive fleet to devour the planet. Correct. And if a Genestealer cult has infiltrated Varkas, we're looking at the potential loss of a world with 20 billion inhabitants. Covenant fixed him with a hard stare. I can't just order an exterminatus, a planetary purge, not without proof, but I also can't let the cult grow. I need someone who can infiltrate the hive, identify the cult, and eliminate it before it's too late. You need a detective. Yes. Batman considered the mission parameters. This was different from Armageddon. No open warfare, no clear enemy. This was investigation, infiltration, the kind of work he'd done in Gotham for decades. But on a planetary scale, with billions of lives hanging in the balance. I'll do it. Alone? No. I'll need my squad. Covenant nodded. Very well. You deploy in 6 hours. The Emperor protects, Space Marine. The Emperor protects. As Covenant left, Titus approached Batman. You volunteered us for an investigation mission? We're warriors, not detectives. We're whatever we need to be to protect humanity, Batman replied. This mission needs investigation. So we'll investigate, Fenris growled. I don't like sneaking around, I like fighting. You'll get your fight, but first we need to find the enemy. Hive Varkas was a city of 100 million souls, stacked vertically into a single massive structure that reached kilometers into the sky. The upper spires were home to nobles and merchant princes. The middle levels housed workers and bureaucrats. The underhive, the lowest levels, was a lawless hell of gangs, mutants, and those too poor or desperate to live anywhere else. The Genestealer cult would be in the underhive. That's where Batman would start. He couldn't wear his full power armor too conspicuous. Instead, he donned a concealing robe that hid most of his augmented frame. Even hunched over, he stood nearly 7 feet tall. But in the underhive, that wasn't unusual. This was a place of mutants and abhumans, where being tall or strong or strange was the norm rather than the exception. His squad scattered across the hive, each taking a different sector to investigate. They would report findings via encrypted Vox channels, coordinate their search, close the net around the cult systematically. Batman descended into the underhive via a cargo elevator, surrounded by workers returning from their shifts. They avoided eye contact in places like this. Curiosity could get you killed. He moved through the lower levels like a shadow, his detective's instincts active, cataloging everything. The architecture here was ancient, built on foundations that predated the Imperium itself. The air was thick with industrial pollutants and the smell of unwashed humanity. Flickering lumen strips provided minimal lighting. Gang tags marked territorial boundaries. And everywhere, Batman saw the signs of poverty and desperation that he recognized from Gotham's worst neighborhoods. He spent 3 days investigating. He talked to locals, carefully, never revealing his identity. He studied the disappearances, mapping them, looking for patterns. He found cult symbols, four-armed spirals, alien script painted on walls in the deepest sections of the underhive. And he found witnesses. An old woman, half mad from drinking promethium-tainted water, babbled about angels from the deep who came in the night and took her son. A gang leader, drunk and boastful, claimed he'd made a deal with the new gods who promised power and immortality. A child drew pictures of monsters with too many arms and mouths full of teeth. Batman pieced it together, case by case, clue by clue. The cult was here, and it was bigger than anyone suspected. On the 4th day, he found their nest. It was in the industrial sector, in a forgotten maintenance complex that should have been sealed decades ago. Batman approached carefully, his sensors detecting movement inside human and Xenos signatures intermingled. He voxed his squad. Target located. Grid reference, Sigma 77. Multiple hostiles. Recommend full team assault. Acknowledged, Titus replied. En route, ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Batman could wait, should wait. But every minute the cult existed, more people were being infected, more hybrid abominations were being born. He made a decision, He entered the complex alone. The interior was a nightmare. The walls were covered in biological growth, not decay, but something alive, pulsing, alien. The cult had been here for years, maybe decades, slowly transforming this place into a hybrid between human architecture and Tyranid hive structure. Batman moved silently through corridors that twisted in impossible ways. His enhanced senses picked up sounds chanting in languages no human throat should speak, the skittering of claws on metal, breathing that was too wet, too hungry. He found the cult in a vast chamber at the complex's heart. There were hundreds of them, humans twisted by Xenos' genetic infection, bearing extra limbs, fangs, claws. They were gathered around something central, something massive. The Patriarch. The original Genestealer, the source of the infection. It was 10 feet of pure alien horror, 4 arms tipped with claws that could shred ceramite, a mouth within a mouth, eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence. Around it, the human cultists worshipped, offering sacrifices, singing praises to the great devourer that would one day consume their world. Batman watched from the shadows, analyzing. He couldn't fight that many enemies alone, not even with his Space Marine enhancements. But he could disrupt them, sow chaos, buy time for his squad to arrive. He planted the melta charges he'd brought, carefully positioned for maximum structural damage. Then he set his bolter to full automatic, said a prayer to whatever might be listening, not the Emperor, but the memory of Alfred, of his parents, of everyone who'd believed in him, and opened fire. The bolter roared, explosive rounds tearing through the cultists. The chamber erupted in chaos. The Patriarch shrieked, a sound that resonated across psychic frequencies. The cultists charged as a horde, their humanity burned away by generations of genetic corruption. Batman fought with everything he'd learned. Space Marine combat doctrine mixed with the brutal efficiency he'd developed in Gotham. He used the terrain, the narrow corridors, to funnel the cultists. He targeted the largest, the most mutated, the ones who seemed to be leaders. He moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the horde to surround him. But there were too many. Even superhuman endurance has limits. A cultist got past his guard, its claws raking across his side. Another grabbed his bolter, wrestled it away. Batman drew his combat knife, started fighting with blade and fist, but the tide was turning against him. Then his squad arrived. They came through the complex like the Emperor's own wrath, power armor gleaming, weapons firing, voices raised in war cries. Fenris tore into the cultists with his chainsword, laughing as blood sprayed. Titus moved with mechanical precision, each shot a kill. Vulcan used his flamer to purge the alien growth from the walls. Dante danced through the melee, his power sword carving elegant patterns of death. Together, they pushed toward the Patriarch. The Xenos leader was intelligent, Batman realized. It didn't fight like a beast. It used tactics, positioning, sent its cultists to die while it maneuvered for advantage. It was learning from their fighting style, adapting. But Batman had fought intelligent enemies before. He triggered the melta charges. The explosions brought down sections of the ceiling, cut off the Patriarch's escape routes, isolated it from its remaining cultists. The creature screeched in rage and fear. Yes, fear. It could feel fear and charged directly at Batman. They met in the center of the chamber. The Patriarch was faster than anything Batman had fought, its 4 arms attacking from multiple angles. But Batman didn't try to match its speed. He predicted its movements, used his detective's mind to analyze its attack patterns, found the rhythm in its strikes. There. An opening. Fractional. Microseconds. Batman drove his power knife into the Patriarch's primary brain. The creature spasmed, its psychic hold on the cultists breaking. All around the chamber, the human hybrids collapsed, their minds shattered by the sudden severing of the hive-mind connection. The Patriarch fell, twitched once, died. Batman stood over its corpse, breathing hard. His armor was damaged, his body bruised, but he was alive. That, Fenris said, walking over and clapping Batman on the shoulder hard enough to stagger him, was a good fight. That was foolish, Titus corrected. You should have waited for support. If I'd waited, they might have summoned the Hive Fleet. Every minute counted. Perhaps, But next time, trust your brothers to fight alongside you." Batman nodded. Trust. That was still hard for him. He'd spent so many years as a lone warrior, relying only on himself. But he was part of a squad now, part of something larger. Maybe that was okay. Maybe that was even better. "Extract the Patriarch's corpse," Batman said. "Inquisitor Covenant will want to study it. And sweep the complex. Make sure we didn't miss any cultists." They worked through the night, purging the alien infestation from Hive Varkas. By dawn, the threat was eliminated. 20 billion people saved, and most of them would never know how close they'd come to extinction. That was fine with Batman. He hadn't become a space marine for glory. He'd done it to protect people. And tonight, he had. Batman stood in the observation deck of the battle barge, looking out at the stars. They were in transit to their next mission, somewhere in the Segmentum Pacificus. Another war, another enemy, another chance to serve. Dante joined him, silent for a long moment. "You're thinking about your home," the Blood Angel said finally. "The world you left behind. Always. Do you regret it? Coming here, becoming what you are?" Batman considered the question. Did he regret it? He'd abandoned Gotham, left it to burn. He'd undergone agonizing transformation, sacrificed his humanity. He'd become a weapon in the Emperor's arsenal, fighting in wars he barely understood. But he'd also saved billions of lives. He'd fought evil on a scale he'd never imagined. He'd found brothers, real brothers, who fought alongside him not for profit or glory, but because they believed in protecting humanity. "No," Batman said finally. "I don't regret it. This is what I was always meant to be. I just didn't know it until now." Dante nodded. "The Emperor has a plan for all of us, even those not born in this universe." Batman didn't respond to that. He still wasn't sure he believed in the Emperor's divinity, but he believed in the mission, and sometimes that was enough. His codec, a device he'd managed to bring with him from his old universe, now modified to work with Imperial technology, crackled suddenly. A voice he hadn't heard in months spoke, distorted but recognizable. "Bruce? Bruce, can you hear me? Oracle. Barbara Gordon. Alive." Batman's hand went to the codec, activated it. "Barbara, you're alive. How?" "Long story. Bruce, it's gone. The government bombed it 3 days after you disappeared. Purge protocol, they called it, but some of us survived. Dick, Tim, Damien, we got out. We're trying to rebuild, but..." Her voice broke slightly. "Bruce, we need you. Can you come back?" Batman closed his eyes. Gotham needed him. His family needed him. Everything he'd fought for, sacrificed for, was in ashes, and they were calling him home. But he was needed here too. Across 1,000,000 worlds, billions of people were fighting for survival against horrors that made Gotham's worst look trivial. If he left now, those people would die. "Barbara," Batman said slowly, "I can't come back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'm needed here. More than you're needed in Gotham? Yes. I've found something here. Purpose on a scale I never imagined. I'm making a real difference, saving lives by the billions. I can't walk away from that." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. You were always about the mission, Bruce. About saving as many people as possible. If you can save more people there, then that's where you need to be. Tell the others I'm sorry. Tell them I'll come back if I can. But right now, there are people here who need me more. I will. Stay safe, Bruce. Gotham will always be here when you're ready." The signal cut out. Batman stood in the darkness, watching the stars, feeling the weight of his choices. He'd left his home, his city, his family. For this. For a war in a universe not his own. Fighting for an emperor he didn't believe was a god. Becoming something barely human. Was it worth it? Batman looked down at his hands, massive, augmented, capable of crushing steel. These hands had saved billions of lives in the months since his transformation. These hands would save billions more. Yes. It was worth it. Brother Batman. Titus called from the doorway. We're approaching our next deployment. Briefing in 10 minutes. Acknowledged. I'm coming. Batman took one last look at the stars, wondering which one might be his own Earth, his own Gotham, then turned away. He had work to do, people to save, a war to fight. He was the Batman, Dark Knight, detective, and now, Angel of Death, and he would never stop fighting. Not until the last enemy was defeated, not until the last innocent was saved, not until the mission was complete. That was his oath, his purpose, his reason for existence, and he would keep that oath, across universes, across time itself, because he was vengeance. He was the night, and now he was eternal, the end.